Good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sao Paulo and welcome to the launch of the TEEB for Business Brazil. As you know, the TEEB study was officially launched less than a year ago. This was in October in 2010 in Nagoya. And at that time itself, your environment minister had announced that there would be a TEEB for Brazil. And at around the same time, CNE and others had said that there would be interest in a TEEB for business in Brazil. And sure enough, a lot of progress has taken place since then. I would like to thank CNE. I would like to thank Conservation International for organizing this launch. I would like to thank UNEP for their participation and support, and WCMC as well. And especially I would like to thank the many companies, including the 5 platinum sponsors who have put together the money which will make the TEEB for Business Brazil study possible. You have an interesting challenge ahead because we have 2 significant events coming up next year at which you can showcase the results of your work. There is, of course, the Rio Plus 20 meeting coming up in June next year. And then after that, later in October next year, that's a year from now, you will have the next COP meeting, which is in India, in Hyderabad. Of course, 6 months or a year are not a long time to prepare a proper TEEB for business because, in fact, a lot of work needs to be done. Remember that we have to look at 3 different aspects from a company's point of view and from a business sector's point of view. We have to look at the risks to business sectors and to companies from the loss of ecosystems and biodiversity. We have to look at the opportunities that present themselves because the other side of the risk is the opportunity. And at the same time, we have to see in what way we can measure and therefore better manage the impacts of business on biodiversity. In other words, the kind of disclosure, the kind of management processes and calculations that have to be put together to truly understand a company's impacts on the natural environment and how best to reduce those impacts if they are negative and to increase them if they are positive. In terms of the sectors that you will look at here in Brazil, no doubt forestry and logging are important, but at the same time, so also is agriculture, and its impacts on forests is significant. You will also look at hydroelectricity, which is one of the benefits, if you like, which the forests and their ability to store water will provide. And of course, you will also look at tourism, ecotourism. You must also look at mining in terms of its opportunities as well as its impacts on nature, and that mining has to be not just on land, but also in the oceans. Petroleum, therefore, is very much part of the sectoral focus that a TEEB for Business Brazil study would have. So this is clearly a very wide-ranging study. And how can I forget? You have implications here even for businesses such as cosmetics, because you need to evaluate how much of the value of cosmetics in Brazil come from natural compounds and how these processes of extraction can in fact benefit local communities and benefit the profitability of your companies. So there's really a vast landscape of different opportunities here in terms of looking at Brazil from a TEEB perspective. In other words, measuring the value of ecosystems and what they provide business, measuring the risks of those losses that are happening right now, measuring the opportunities of stemming those losses in terms of new devices, payments for ecosystem services, new mechanisms for sharing in the benefits of protected areas and so on. And finally, also in terms of how the overall ecosystem management of Brazil from a business perspective ties in at the state level and ties in at the national level. Because at the end of the day, the TEEB for Business Brazil study is in fact part of a wider study which is hopefully going to happen at the same time in Brazil, which addresses these issues from a national perspective and from a state perspective. I understand that some states in Brazil are already looking at launching state-level studies, and of course, at the national level, there is a national study being planned. And all of these really need to be coordinated as part of one collective suite of studies, because ultimately, the database that you use, the database on ecosystem services, is the same database. It is what you people collect together. On that front, there is good news, because unlike some countries where there isn't much available information. In fact, in Brazil, you have a wealth of information. There is a very good recent study on payments on the value of protected areas. There are many studies on examples of payments for ecosystem services. And of course, there's a whole body of literature around the value of nature, valuation methodologies. And of course, TEEB itself has got several reports and sections which are extracted from Brazil. So there is a lot of material available. And on top of that, of course, there's work which is going on in the context of CBD implementation and Millennium Ecosystem sub-global assessments. So all of this material is available as source material for the TEEB for Business study. The challenge, of course, is how do you extract from this vast library of resources and present analysis which is relevant, which is endorsed by the companies involved and by the sectors involved, and which achieves change for the better, both in terms of business profitability and in terms of ecological security. And how will you do that? In a phased manner, because there is not much time for Rio. There is hopefully a year till the next CBD conference, but even 8 months or a year are short periods. So my request is that the group that is gathered here thinks in terms of interim reports and scopes carefully what they can present in interim reports for these two big events that are coming up, Rio as well as COP11 of CBD. And then goes ahead and plans the overall study, which then will go into all of the relevant sectors which have both a dependency as well as an impact on nature, and have therefore a need to value and evaluate and measure and start managing better their impacts on nature. That would be, of course, the full-scale TEEB business study, and I do expect that would take much longer. But at the same time, I'm optimistic that it will probably be amongst the first to come through. TEEB for Business Brazil, just as the case for TEEB Brazil, are the first of their respective kinds of studies launched in the world. And I'm delighted, therefore, that I've been invited to give this opening address here in Sao Paulo. I wish all of you all the best for this meeting and for the work that follows. It's not an easy path. I thank and encourage colleagues from UNEP and from other organizations who are involved in this process, and especially I thank and encourage the companies who have stepped forward and made financial contributions as well as commitments of human resources to this process. All I can say is if you carry it through to its logical conclusion, you will all benefit, and so also will ecosystems and biodiversity in Brazil. Thank you.